I do want to go to Shay first because I want to give Noelle a bit of a break. But just one of the things, Noelle, before I give you a bit of a break, that struck me is that, particularly when you were talking about Section 29, which is, for people who don't know, that's an appeal against not being allowed to enrol your child in a school. It was just that you mentioned contact your Se&Noelle, and you mentioned it a few times at the last bit, talk to your Se&Noelle. Now, from National Parents Council point of view, parents ask us, but how do I know who my Se&Noelle is? Where do I get that information? You tell me I have one, but who is it, and how do I know? So, sorry, I have a row from the website. Sorry, I should have said that on it.
Sorry, it's on the website, all the Se&Noelle offices, and what you might find if you look at the Se&Noelle for Blackrock and you ring them up and they might say, actually I'm not the Se&Noelle for that particular school, but here's the number of the Se&Noelle, so you can track it through that. Is that okay?
Just to elaborate on that, if you go into our website, if you pick a county, it will tell you which Se&Noelles are in that county. For example, if it was Offaly, so who are the Se&Noelles and the contact details, and there's no else in Dublin, it'll break Dublin down, obviously Dublin's so big, into different regions, but that's the kind of starting point.
Do you apply to Se&Noelle for where your child is going to school or where he lives?
The Se&Noelle supported schools. In other words, it's the school which your child is either attending or proposing to attend. Just in that regard, in addition to talking to the Se&Noelles, we have two publications. We have parental information leaflets. I think Andrew outside will have some of them. And we also have a booklet called Choosing a School, which is designed to assist parents in identifying what type, not which school, what type of school may be appropriate for their child. They're available in hard copy, but they're also available on our website.
Okay, I'll go into the questions in the boxes now, just because we've got quite a few to get through and not much time. So the first question is, what do you call the work an SNA? What do you call the work that an SNA does who teaches an item on the curriculum at the teacher's request, and/or who has to reinforce concepts to a child when the teacher has moved on? That's a shame, sorry.
That's me. What do I call it? I call it something. I think it's precisely what I was trying to get across there. It's not what the SNA scheme is for. And if we were, for example, to identify that as part of the use of the allocation in a school, which might imply that there's spare capacity, let's put it that way, in the school, we could possibly be adjusting a level of SNA in a school to reflect the fact that there's more than care needs being met. It's not what SNAs are in school for. There are kind of, I was going to say, there's what the phrase I've seen used in relation to this is that the students with the most complex needs are being taught by the least qualified personnel in the school, and what I was going to say is, funny enough, in fairness, it's not a black and white issue, in that there was a report produced by St Angela's College there about a couple of months ago. I saw a copy of it, which was a study of SNA supports in, say, the Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, Cappamountton area. And they wrote to parents, schools, SNAs themselves also part of the study. SNAs sometimes feel compelled to do some of that work in case their own employment is kind of in jeopardy, and they felt to some extent uncomfortable with it. This is where we're trying to ensure, and it goes back to the core message we're trying to get across, the primary support to the school is a teacher, and students are to be taught by the class teacher, or by the resource teacher, or by the learning support teacher. If that was to be the main reason, if that's the reason that an SNA support is kind of accessed in a school setting, we will have no choice but to sort of adjust that.
Thank you. Noelle, do Se&Noelles sit in classes and observe teaching requirements in the class? Do Se&Noelles give feedback to principals, educational coordinators?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. First, if a Se&Noelle is doing a full-scale review in the school, they may go in to observe the children. They're not in to observe how the teacher is working. They're not in to observe how the SNA is working. It's a care needs review as such, so they're in to see the child and how it's working for the child. So we wouldn't have a role in saying, actually, I don't think you're teaching that child properly. What you would have a role in saying is, if you went in and observed just the last question, that the SNA is teaching the child in the corner, that's where you would go and give feedback to the principal and say, sorry, that's not what that person was employed to do, and you need to look at that. Does that?
Okay.
Can I just add to that? I mean, what we do have, as Noelle rightly points out, it's a review of the level of care needs in the school. It's not a review of individual staff or anything like that. At times, because of the level of expertise that the Se&Noelles have, principals or teachers, because of the situation where they might be isolated, if you want to call it that, might discuss how they're managing to meet the special education needs of the student in the school, and we can act as a signpost service to advise them about the special education support service that's available, or a number of other services, or to contact their NEP psychologist. So it's not like we just go in, say nothing and walk out. I mean, we do engage with the school, but they are the primary sort of providers of those support. We wouldn't critically appraise them, but we do speak to them, we do discuss with them and point them in the right direction.
Keep hold of the microphone there, Shay, it's your turn again. So this question is actually in two parts, but the first bit's more of a statement. SNAs need better training in order for them to be able to effectively help children with special needs. The use of isolation rooms or safe rooms is a lazy and dangerous way to deal with children. This practice needs to stop. What do you think?
Well, the first question, more training. I alluded to that in my own sort of presentation. You saw the way the numbers exploded from 300, probably 15 years ago, to 11,000, almost 12,000 now. And I know that some training is available, but I think going up a level, the level of training that's required in the education sector, there are now 11,000 teachers and almost 12,000 SNAs providing support to students with special educational needs. Figure which I saw in answer to a parliamentary question there 2 weeks ago was that 17% of the entire education budget is allocated in relation to students with special education needs. Now that would be teachers, SNAs, special classes, there's big capital costs. That's bigger than the whole third level budget. So within that whole sort of allocation, there is a lot of playing catch-up going on in terms of upskilling teachers as well as SNAs. I agree, I think it's there. And it's something hopefully the department are proposing to address, and I expect that we'll also be part of how providing advice on how that should be addressed. In relation to the isolation rooms, I mean, this came up I think about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and I mentioned earlier that we were requested to provide policy advice on autism to students on the autistic spectrum. And within that advice, the Minister specifically asked the Council to provide some advice in relation to the use of isolation rooms. And the advice isn't published, as I said, but we would hope that it will be published in the very near future. So I don't know exactly what's in that advice yet, because it's still sort of going through its final stages. But my understanding is that that issue will be addressed to some extent in that advice.
Noelle, how does the Se&Noelle decide, and I think you might have covered the first bit, but the second bit might need a bit more depth. How does the Se&Noelle decide how schools are allocated resources, i.e. access to the SNA or full dedicated SNA support? The second bit then says, how can the Se&Noelle disregard professional reports or inputs when making a decision?
First, but I think I answered okay. I don't need to say it again, I don't think. The second thing is, it's not that you would go against a professional report. You need to take a professional report and use it to inform your decision. But you could quite often get, like I could get 10 applications in a row with professional reports saying this child needs a full-time SNA all day long. You know, they can say that on all the reports. You've got to dig through that and say, what exactly does this child need within the school? There is no individual SNA support for a child. And the HSEs know this, and NEPs know this. So, you know, that they are not supposed to put in reports what the quantum of support is. It's us that decides that, along with the school and the parent. Does that answer that?
Okay, thank you. The next one, Shay, there's a lot fitted into this page, so give me a little bit, I'm not quite sure where the lines are going because it's all written smallly. As regards the child diagnosed with dyslexia severe, has the SNA any role with helping the child in the classroom? Child also has a physical disability and has an SNA for rest periods, i.e. the child gets tired, so needs time to rest, particularly during lunch breaks. Could the child not get help from the SNA during the period, that period for dyslexia? So I think it's can they help the rest breaks as well, I think you're asking.
I think there seems to be an element to that question which is saying, can the SNA to some extent address some of the education needs?
I think the physical needs at the break time.
What I picked up from that was that dyslexia in itself will not be care needs arising from dyslexia. There may be, in a small number of cases, because I know that there are some students with specific learning difficulty accessing SNA support, but that would probably be related to behaviour because of how they feel they're becoming detached from the learning experience in the classroom. I referred to that earlier. If a child has a physical disability, there would be care needs arising from that aspect of their needs, and the care needs would be addressed by the SNA, presumably, to meet those needs as those needs arise, as Noelle said, the frequency and extent of those needs that arise in a school setting. That would be something there would be a fair number of students with a physical disability who may have associated learning needs, but their care needs will arise from, presumably, the physical disability, and they should be able to access SNA support.
Okay, thank you. Noelle, you're next one up. Our kids are happy in St. Declan's Balls Bridge, but almost all parents want to know how to plan the future for 5th and 6th class through to secondary. They're wanting support when they get to planning the future for their children.
Transition planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Transitioning is something we've actually got a booklet coming out pretty soon on transitioning from our policy department, looking at what needs to happen transitioning children from preschool into mainstream to secondary, and then secondary on to adult education. So that's nearly ready. I'm not sure when that one's going out. But at the moment, if your child is in a special school and that you're thinking of moving them, I'm unsure now, maybe moving them in 5th and 6th year to another school or preparing them to move for secondary, you can certainly request a meeting in the school around transition planning, and if needed, the Se&Noelle can attend that, or the NEP psychologist do a lot of transition planning at schools as well. So you very definitely, we can support you through that in talking about what your options are. But the school primarily should be setting up those meetings with yourself and looking at what next, because you're also looking at what secondary schools to apply to, what the child's needs are, how they progress, do they need to go back into mainstream school now rather than a special school. Okay, does that answer?
Can I just add to that as well, please? Two things. The vast majority of students, including students with special education needs, transition from, say, a primary to a post-primary setting, where the parent is determining what school the child will go to, etc. There's assistance that we can provide if there are atypical settings required. Because, for example, Noelle said we established 150 special classes this September. They opened for the first time. We now have over 1,000 special classes. But we're opening a greater number of second level special classes because there are students who were not educated in a mainstream setting in primary, and they need a similar setting at second level rather than going into a special school itself. We're trying to keep them within the school community. That's the general, so that's the inclusive approach. We're also, with that, if you go up a level again, within the health sector and the education sector, you may have heard of the health sector Progressing Disability Services model, where they're trying to plan how their services will meet the needs of children as they move through from 0 to 18. And we're trying to get a greater convergence between health and education. And the transition planning stage is between, say, preschool into primary into post-primary, and probably, to some extent more importantly, becoming more relevant nowadays, is second level into adult services, which are way behind the level of services that are there for school-going age children. All of that, we're trying to sort of see if we can have a kind of a common understanding between health and education as to how that process will happen. So we can give you some advice, but parents will probably be looking at the schools and how all schools should be able to meet the needs, unless there's because we can provide support, the same level of support to any school. It's just if there's atypical support required, we then provide advice also to the parents as to where they can access it.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just add to that or ask?
Well, no, maybe
No.
afterwards with the stand and that bit, yeah, you can get more information, but with 2 boxes from here. Okay, so Shay, the next question for you, there's 4 questions on this, I'm going to, some of them cross over, so I'm just going to point out 2. First question is, what are the present qualifications for being an SNA? And then the second question is, what has the NCSE research concluded in relation to the outcomes of resource teaching hours in mainstream schools?
Second question is a big question. The first question, the qualification is a past junior cert. So there's no specific qualifications in terms of the capacity to apply for a job. What has happened in recent years is that schools, in looking for SNAs to take up new posts, are probably looking for SNAs or applicants who have experience. And I think as part of it could be the Haddington Road Agreement, there's a redeployment scheme there for SNAs who lose their jobs in a school. They can have the first go, if you want to call it, at applying for jobs in other schools. That they have to satisfy the school that they're suitable. They don't have an automatic right to get that job. But if they generally are the ones who will obtain employment because of the level of experience that they will be able to articulate when going for a post in a particular school. Because of the numbers of SNAs, and just to give you a sense, about 50 to 55% of schools don't experience any change in the level of SNA allocation from year to year. The other 45% is roughly about, say, 21% go down, about 24% go up on average. So you would see that over 80% of schools would experience no change or an upward movement. About 21%, 1 in 5 say would experience a downward movement. So schools are looking, when they receive additional SNAs allocation, they're looking for people who have experience, and that's probably from the school's perspective what the position is. In relation to your other question then...
It was about what the research has concluded around research teaching hours in mainstream schools.
I think the question underpins the reason why the new model of allocation was proposed by the council, because I'll go back to what I said earlier, we've 11,000 teachers working in the system in relation to students with special education needs, but the focus, and I'm sure it's for yourself too, in relation to teaching and SNA supports, the focus is almost entirely on getting access to those supports. There's very little focus on what difference those supports make and what the outputs or outcomes are. And the new model of allocation is talking about front-loading resources into schools based on their profile. So no school can say we don't have the resources, come back to what Noelle said, they'll have the resource teaching. But also it's giving the schools more powers, on the flip side of that is responsibility for determining how they use the resources and what outcomes will be achieved. So I think if the new model is adopted, and we're hoping it will be, it won't be in this year, probably won't be in next year, could be the year afterwards, that there will begin to be a slow shift towards what outcomes are being achieved as a result of the use of almost 20% of the entire teaching supports that are there in the country.
Thank you. Noelle, this is a little bit more in-depth maybe than on your last question, but obviously it's showing a bit of anxiety from parents around this time. How does a parent go about choosing a secondary school for their child who has a learning disability?
And it is a hugely difficult one and causes great anxiety. I mean, the first thing we would say is look at your feeder school, look at your local school. What comes back from some parents is that school is a very academic school and maybe they're not interested in taking their child. We're actually looking at working with schools and changing that. What you need to do is look at the number of schools in your area. If you're talking about mainstream schools, look at your mainstream schools in your area. Go and visit the schools. Go and talk to the principal. Talk to him about your child and your child's needs. You get a feel from the school as to whether this is going to satisfy your child's needs and what way they're going to work with your child. If you're looking at the possibility of a special school or special class, again, you can talk to the Se&Noelle first of all about what options are available in the area. They're not going to tell you where to send your child, that would be wrong, but they can talk through the options of the different things that are available. Then you've got to contact the schools, you've got to visit them, and then ultimately it will be your decision. But as Shane mentioned earlier, we do have a booklet called Choosing a School for Your Child, and I don't know, Andrew might have some of them outside. If he doesn't, you can get them on the website.
Okay, thank you. Shay, how much feedback would one expect from an SNA on a weekly or monthly basis?
I flip that slightly. It's how much feedback from the school. I mean, it's like you're all parents. You're parents of students. You're parents of children, should I say? And I mean, everybody, particularly at primary level, you kind of generally get some feedback from the schools in relation to how your children are getting on in the school. Again, like as I said, I wouldn't focus overly on feedback in relation to the SNA sort of support, because a child is in school to be educated. It's how is my child's education happening, and how is the SNA support assisting that? Because it's, as I said, children are not in school to be cared for. And we want to make sure, going back to what Noelle said about isolation, we don't something to develop whereby there's a view emerging that these children only need to be cared for in the school, they need to be educated.
Okay, thank you. Noelle, are there guidelines for hours my child should get for dyspraxia?
SNA, is it? SNA access for dyspraxia? Well, like any low incidence disability, you're back to the professional report looking at what the care needs are. And that's how you qualify if you have significant care needs. Now, if you have a child with dyspraxia and they're having difficulty with organising themselves during the day, which can happen for a lot of kids with that condition, they're not going to get an SNA for that. You're not going to get an SNA on that basis, and I'm being honest with you. It's the care needs need to be significant. The organisation for the child and the anxiety for the child can often be mediated in the classroom by the teacher or the resource teacher. Like, I know we had one child with quite severe dyspraxia, and a lot of anxiety was coming up, and a lot of behavioural difficulties were coming, and we discovered that really it was, like she was saying earlier, the morning and the evening. Coming in the morning, they were all over the place, didn't know how to organise their books, and this is just in primary. And then leaving, going home, organising their homework, they were getting anxiety. So what the school looked at was taking the resource teacher and saying the resource teacher would take the child first thing in the morning, and as well as doing their teaching, their resource teaching, they would go through their organisation for the day. And in the evening for 10 minutes they would zoom into the classroom and look at everything organised. And that was being managed in the school without an SNA buzzing them. So there are different ways of looking at it. But again, it's like any low incidence disability, it depends on the frequency and intensity of the care needs.
Thank you. Shay, I know this kind of came up in both of your talks, but just maybe to give some reassurance, how is an SNA number determined? If there are additional needs in a class that come to light over the duration of the year, can SNAs be added in?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that since we started back again, we have allocated levels of like a small number of SNAs, because I mentioned that we're still operating under a cap, so we have a small number of SNAs left to allocate, and we have done so in what you might call emergency situations. For example, believe it or not, there are a small number of schools who have no SNAs, and particularly down the country, a child or a family might move into the area, and we have the capacity to allocate resources to the school in those situations. Or if a particular child, if there's a situation develops where there's complex needs emerge, we can also allocate in those circumstances. But the school needs to sort of determine how those needs suddenly emerge in a particular situation. As I said, if there is additionality required, we will look at that, and as I said, we are in a position at this point in time to respond.
Okay, thank you. Noelle, when can a parent contact you after diagnosis? That's the first question. Second question, can a CNO meet the school before entry with the parent? Sorry, I'll ask the second one again. So first one, when can a parent contact you after diagnosis? And second one, can CNO meet with the school before entry with the parent?
Yes, to the second one. The first one is, well, we would hope to address a lot of the issues at parental information sessions throughout the country, and they're rolling out as we speak. So a lot of your questions can be answered at that. There are situations where you've just got a new diagnosis for your child and you just want to talk about your child, and I understand that. So that's, you can ring the Se&Noelle and discuss with them what the issues are coming up for you, what the anxieties are, how do you apply for resources, and the Se&Noelle will explain the whole situation to you. It's the school that applies for resources, and you can take a lot of that anxiety off you. But you can ring the Se&Noelle as soon as you get the diagnosis. But as I say, the parental seminars will go a long way to answering questions, and the parental booklets will go a long way to answering your questions, and the website is very good actually to visit.
Can I just add to that though, just like Noelle pointed out, there are 70 Se&Noelles with 4,000 schools. Se&Noelles are out in schools at least 4 days a week. I find it hard sometimes to get them in to do some of the paperwork. I mean, if such situations arise, that's why we started our parental information programs, particularly aimed at parents of newly diagnosed children, so that they could hear in a kind of a group setting what the position is. Also, I think it would be useful to look at what is on our website, as Noelle said, because we have a lot of information. The Choosing the School booklet, the parental information booklets, which go through a number of supports which are available almost disability by disability. So it will be useful to have looked at some of that information before you make the call, because you may not get to Se&Noelle immediately, and while you're waiting you can sort of read some of that information, and then you might be better placed to ask questions when you actually finally make contact with the Se&Noelle.
Can I just ask quickly, how many people before today were aware or visited the website of the National Council for Special Education? Okay, so there's a few that aren't. So we'll send out the link to some of the things. I mean, obviously a lot of people are, but there are still some people who aren't. So when we're sending out the evaluation piece, we'll send out a link to the website and also to some of the leaflets that Shay's talking about there. Shay, this question I think actually gets to the heart of some of the problems that parents have, and certainly was an issue last year as well, in terms of people get very confused about who's who and what's what and where everybody links up. So this question, is an S&A separate to the SESS?
Yeah, there's so many acronyms in the education sector. I'm only working in it since about '96, and I remember when I came in, my previous background was in social welfare, which had its own entire set of acronyms. And then when I came into education, you have to sort of learn them, and then you become very comfortable with them, and then you forget that people aren't. The S&A is very different from the SESS. The SESS is a special education support service, which is a service designed to provide upskilling, training to teachers, schools. In some cases S&As, but they're primarily focusing on the teachers in the schools, because, as I said, the numbers have exploded and the demand they're trying to meet that demand. What is interesting to note though, in recent times, is that the Minister in February announced the establishment of the Inclusion Support Service, which would be the rolling up of all of those bands of sort of acronyms that are out there to some extent. You have the SESS, you have the NBSS, which is the National Behavioural Support Service, which is there for second level schools to help them where there's a lot of behavioural issues in the school, and the Visiting Teacher Service for the visual and hearing impaired students. Those three services are being combined and brought actually into the National Council for Special Education, so that in addition to the Se&Noelles, who are direct providers of support to schools, the actual other services are being brought in, so that there'll be a greater level of coherence provided to schools and to parents in relation to how supports will be provided in schools to students with special education needs. So I would be hoping in a couple of years' time that the same level of confusion won't be there to the same extent.
Okay, thank you. Noelle, can I as a parent make my own decision regarding which type of school to place my child in if I don't agree with the Se&Noelle? And the second question is, what provisions are there for children with sensory processing disorders?
Okay, the first thing, it is parental choice where your child goes to school. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. At the end of the day, you can gather your information from all the different professionals involved, but at the end of the day, it is your choice where your child goes. The second question, sensory.
Sorry,
sensory.
sensory processing disorder, what supports are there?
Okay. Well, that's not recognised as a low-incidence disability until at the moment it's not, and we don't have a control over that.
Can you just explain low-incidence disability now?
Yeah. So, that is coming through in a lot of reports, but we can't, and you're probably getting a lot of refusals for resource teaching overs, but it would come under, if there are children with difficulties, don't come under our low-incidence remit. They are looked after under the general allocation model for the school, and just make sure that you know that in your head when you're going to the school and they say, my God, the SENO didn't give us anything for sensory processing disorder, and just say, well look, I believe they can be looked at under the general allocation model. Hopefully, if the new model comes in, as Shay said earlier, this will all go away and we'll be up to school to look after your child's needs rather than just ticking a box and getting so many errors. So hopefully that will come in.
Noelle is correct about parental choice, but perhaps what may be an issue in relation to that question is there is sometimes a cost attached to parental choice. And that may mean that if a parent decides to send their child to a school which is not the nearest school which can meet their needs, and there's a transport issue, the department will not necessarily grant the transport because the child will not be transported to the nearest school which can meet their needs. And we've encountered that a number of times. So parents can, it's the same for any parent, if you decide to send your child beyond the nearest school which can meet your needs, there may be issues in relation to the transport. But in relation to the support, resource teaching or SNA support, we provide them to all schools indiscriminately depending on the need. But as I said, there may be some costs attached to the exercising of parental choice.
Okay, I think we've got time for just one more question to each person. So, and we've pretty much got through them all. So I've put the last ones here and I'm trying to kind of pull them together. So, Shay, your last question. Can SNAs carry out any outside programs for the students they are caring for, i.e. physio or OT programs?
The short answer is yes, but I'll put that yes into a context. If there's a program, like SNAs are not therapists, and therapy supports are provided through, are recommended, identified and provided through a professional cohort of therapists, or whatever you want to call them, either in the health sector. And take speech and language therapy is a good example. Schools, SLTs, work with schools and at times say to the school, here's a program that we want you to sort of follow, and we'll be back every couple of weeks to keep an eye on how you're getting on with that program. The program is given to the school. The school is taking responsibility for the delivery of that program within the overall responsibility of the therapist to take ownership of what program is being provided and how it's rolling out. So the school should be, going back to the planning process, should be planning how they'll do that. I have seen situations where they have integrated the SNA support into the provision of some of that support, and that's justifiable and acceptable in the context. But if we were to arrive at a situation where the school says, great, we have an SLT program, that's for you, that's the only reason we want SNA support to be provided to a child, we're then into a situation where we may say, no, hold on, that's not what SNAs are there for. What we're saying is that it's part of a planned approach by the school. There are care needs present, and the school is still taking responsibility, and the class teachers taking responsibility, but the SNA can be part of that planned approach. But it's a balance, and the vast majority of the balance lies with the school.
Okay, thank you. And Noelle, the last question for you. Are children with high IQ but additional needs such as ADHD and Asperger's missing out, as SNAs are increasingly being appointed on health and safety grounds and not to support educational needs?
Well, the question sort of answered itself, there, because the SNA is not there to support the educational needs. That's not what it's there for. The SNA is there to support the care needs. And I think that's... Sorry, I can't... The educational needs? That's the school resource team and the class teacher. So if you have a child with Asperger's, autism, they will have qualified for, at the moment the way it works, they've qualified for 5 hours resource teaching a week. So that's up to the resource team.